Hello and welcome to Dr. VGP Talk Show. Hello and welcome to Dr. VGP Talk Show that reaches 42 million households, including 2 million households in the United States of America. In today's episode, you're going to meet a crusader, a woman who has worked 20 years with the Jewish community and visited Israel 35 times in the last 20 years. Miss KRISTINA King, the founder of Shiloh Institute, is trying to build bridges between the Jewish community and the African American community. Stay tuned to listen and hear and see how KRISTINA King is trying to bring peace to the Israel-Hamas conflict. During this talk show with KRISTINA King, you're going to hear for the first time something astounding. Do you know there are 4,500 African American Jews living in Israel in a little town of Demona? And these African American Jews are now demanding their equal rights in Israel.
President Biden, you haven't done enough. President Biden, you need to stop the war between Israel and Hamas. President Biden, you need to learn about the Black Jews, descendants of America that live in Demona, Israel, that need your support and need your help. You need to act now.
All the area in the north, which is green, all the area in the north, which is green, it's Bethesda, all the rivers that came from the Golan Heights, this is the area of Bethesda, the very good fishing area. So the triangle from Magdala to Bethesda, and
Good evening. Welcome to Dr. VGP Talk Show. We have with us today a lady of sorts, KRISTINA King. She is the founder of the Shiloh Institute. Well, you're going to find out about what KRISTINA King is all about, her vision and her mission in this episode of Dr. VGP Talk Show that reaches 42 million households, including 2 million households in the United States of America. Welcome, KRISTINA King. So lovely to have you on this talk show.
Thank you.
You know, when I met KRISTINA for the first time, she reminds me of a combination of Coretta Scott King. You all know the wife of the legendary Martin Luther King Jr. for her graciousness. And also along with that, when you look at KRISTINA and her actions, you remind me of Billie Jean King, the tennis star with 39 Grand Slams and 20 Wimbledon titles. She was a woman of power and courage. So in short, KRISTINA King today is a woman of grace, courage, and conquering challenges.
Thank you.
KRISTINA, you have been 35 times since 2004 to Israel. You all know today that Gaza, Israel, the war is engaging all our attention, the media headlines, and it's one of the most gravest wars going on in our time, where the innocent on both sides are being killed.
Yes.
And KRISTINA has, I wouldn't say it's a fortunate, or KRISTINA has visited and worked in Israel for 35 times from 2004 to 2023. So explain, KRISTINA, to our viewers, how did your association with Israel start? When and how?
Thank you. You know, it's really been a journey that began by faith. I was in Detroit, had recently been saved, and my relationship with the church. My background was in marketing and public relations, and so a pastor there, Pastor Glenn Plummer, who was known in the community for his travels to Israel. He was the chairman of the National Religious Broadcasters at the time, and on his outgoing message, he gave a message about why Israel should engage with the African American community. And he asked me to, when he came back from a meeting with his retirement from the NRB as the chairman, the Knesset, the Israeli Knesset, was the host of that reception. And when he gave that message, he was invited to travel and to speak to the Jewish community all over the world. And he came back because they had asked him, well, how are you going to bring this message forth? Did you have an organization? And at the time, he didn't. So he gave me his message on a CD, and he knew of my background in marketing and development. And he asked me, could I take that message and to come up with the pillars of an organization? And that's what I did.
So in 2004, the Fellowship of Israel and Black Americans was born.
Yes.
And that was how the former chairperson of the National Religious Broadcasters brought that to happen.
Together with Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein from the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And I became
Rabbi Hakim was in Detroit, Michigan, or in Chicago?
He was in Chicago, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein.
So it was between Detroit and Chicago was born FIBA, the Federation of Israel and Black Americans. And you were part of putting the organization together, and you were there for 3 years, 2004 to 2007. So could you briefly tell us what you did in that organization?
It was really about helping to foster relationship between the Black and Jewish communities. We studied about the history of those two communities, particularly focusing on the civil rights movement and the coalition between the Black and Jewish community during the civil rights movement. And additionally, the rich history between the Black and Jewish communities.
How do you know, usually the Jewish community are perceived as bankers, rich people, and very pious in synagogue and ethics. And the Black American community have their own colorful history behind it. How did that, was it easy to merge, get them to start talking about each other?
Well, there's a long history between the two communities, so particularly in the 60s and the civil rights movement. So when you see the pictures that many of us don't realize at this time, Dr. King he worked closely with the Jewish community during the civil rights movement. So 70% of the funding, 50% of the attorneys, many of the foundation of many of the lawsuits and of many of the studies and were done from the Jewish community. So there's been a tremendous history between the Black and Jewish community with the civil rights movement, with the working with the labor unions. And if you go back even further and you look at theologically, the Black church and the Black community focuses very much on the Old Testament and on the Hebrew Bible. So the story of Moses, the story of the Exodus story is...
So you're telling me that the Jewish community played a significant role in the civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the first time I'm hearing it. And so that's good to know.
Yes. Well, you know, in the picture where the iconic picture of Dr. King, in the movie Selma, they depicted that person as a Greek Orthodox priest. That's not who it was. It was actually a Jewish rabbi. So Rabbi Joachim Prince and many other rabbis were partners with Dr. King. The Jewish community played a significant role in the civil rights movement.
So from 2004 to 2007, you were with FIBA. So what did you do after that?
So after that, during that time, I kept running into people from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Okay. And so when Rabbi Eckstein and Pastor Plummer parted and went their separate ways, I went and became the first director of outreach to the African American community for AIPAC. So that was...
So, you know, AIPAC is one of the largest Jewish lobby in the country. Correct me if I'm wrong, KRISTINA. Yeah. And AIPAC is truly the strongest lobby I've heard of.
Yeah.
So that's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee.
Yes.
And that's a big lobby, which it also goes to make sure who's in office, whether a congressman or a senator or president or a governor or a mayor of any state. That's a huge organization. So you were the director for the outreach for the African American community. Yes. For that organization for 7 long years, from 2007 to 2014. So tell us about your role. Of course, it was sad to know FIBA, the two founders, parted their ways. And see, that's how important it is for us during this time of conflict, that at least the leaders unite together and yes. part ways. I mean, that's a very important message you're sending us to the next generation, to yes. the youth, the present generation, to learn that sticking together, no matter your skin color, no matter your ethnic community, no matter your political affiliation, but to be united, yes. that can do wonders. Now, tell us your role in AIPAC.
Well, so AIPAC is the organization, like you said, that works on educating on the U.S.-Israel relationship. And so that was the first year that they began doing outreach to different communities. Up until that time, AIPAC had been a Jewish organization. And so I was the first African-American outreach director. They also were doing outreach at that time to the evangelical Christian community, later to the Hispanic community. And so they began to engage other communities to learn about the role of Israel and about the role of the U.S.-Israel relationship and its role in America. So many trips we engaged with leaders from the political, from the business, from community, and from faith organizations. And really, it was like going to Harvard every day because we learned so much. And I have to say that AIPAC was tremendous in teaching leaders from the African American community about foreign policy and about, just to learn from that part of the world is like box seats of like what's happening in the world, both from a political perspective as well as a faith perspective. So we took all kind of leaders. We took them on trips. So that's where many of my trips to Israel came from, engaging with those leaders. Not only trips of the Holy Land, because many people go and travel to Israel from a faith perspective, but also to learn about the unique relationship between the United States.
It's so good to know that AIPAC has made outreach into all the communities, like you mentioned, the African American community, the Hispanic community, and recently, I think in November of 2023, the Stand With Us, another Jewish organization for Israel, honored one of our Indian American leaders, Dr. Bharat Barai from Indiana, for his work against anti-Semitism. So, so there's a lot of synergy, and reaching out to the ethnic communities is the answer for today's strife and conflict.
Well, like your work in bridging the gap between communities, one thing if you have any issue in the United States or when you're in a democracy, you have to have allies.
Absolutely.
So you need to reach out between communities. It's not always the easiest work, as you know, but I know just from even in the things that I've learned from you and from the work that you do here and around the world, bridging people's communities. It's so fascinating and so much to learn when we come into relationship with other communities. And if we're going to get things done, especially if you're in a minority community, you better have some allies. The Jewish community has been a tremendous ally to African Americans. Have always been our greatest ally.
That's great to know, KRISTINA King. Now, tell us, after your 7-year stint with APAC, you were with IFC&J.
Yes.
What does that stand for, and what did you do there?
So IFCJ, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. So my entry into this work was very much from a faith perspective. Of course, when I went to APAC, that was all about politics and about community and about
it's a healthy mix.
Yes, it is. It is an important mix.
Absolutely.
And so, but politics can get you tired after a little while. So I decided I needed to go back to the faith perspective, and I worked with Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein, a tremendous leader out of Chicago and Israel. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is an organization that does humanitarian work. So, again, it was educating the Black church and Black community. We worked across all of the denominations. So with all of the large Black church denominations, part of that was about learning about the Jewish roots of Christianity, and it was also about engaging in the work of Aliyah, so Jews around the world coming to Israel, and also in working.
Amazing. You are becoming an expert.
Yes.
On the Jewish community and
Absolutely.
Israel from different dimensions. It all started with the Fellowship of Israel and Black Americans. Now tell us on the last stint of PILOS. What does PILOS mean? What is PILOS doing? I know from 2017 to 2021, you were very actively involved with PILOS. What does PILOS mean?
So the Philos Project, also Passages Israel, is an organization that worked focusing on college-age students. And so in those 4 years when I was there, we took almost 10,000 college students, Christian college students, from all over the nation to Israel. So it was fascinating to work with college-age students. So my focus was, again, with the denominational leaders and young leaders from the Christian community, and also from the historically Black colleges and universities. So it was the core of Black America and the young people, and absolutely fascinating work.
It's fascinating to hear from a young African-American lady, so much of involvement with the Jewish community and Israel. Tell us something about your childhood. Where were you born? What did your parents do? And how did you get involved? What prepared you for such a great missionary role?
So my family was very focused on education, very focused on...
Where were you born? Which city?
So, interestingly enough, my father, who was a chemist, was getting his PhD at Utah State University in organic chemistry. And that's where I was born, in Logan, Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah.
That's where Mormons are very powerful and popular.
So, yes, I don't remember too much. He was getting his PhD at the time, but I learned how smart he really was when I was in college, when everyone at Duke, when they change their major from becoming a doctor to something else when they don't pass organic chemistry. And my father had his PhD in organic chemistry.
Wow.
So we were very focused on education. My great-grandfather was an attorney, and so were his 3 sons, were all attorneys at NYU. So I came from a family that was very educated, very very involved in the world, very involved in politics and engaged in the world. So I grew up in Northern California. I went to Duke University, and after that moved to
Duke University, North Carolina?
Yes. And then went to Detroit. That was where I got married, had my kids, and at that time, and then got saved and had just a incredible faith experience where the Lord just broke into my life before I got married. So I just have been a person, and even with my own children, very involved with the world, very involved with traveling, in making sure that my children and other people travel around the world, a global-minded person. So I think that very much came from growing up in Northern California, where you just have all kinds of people, all
My
kinds
God, you're
of
truly inclusive. I think born in
Yeah.
Utah, then brought up in Northern California, studied in North Carolina, and then went to work in Detroit, and now you're with us in Chicago and living in Indiana.
Yeah.
Wow, what a thing. Now, I mean, it's good to know, I think, your father, who was a PhD in organic chemistry, which is a very tough subject, has had some good genes, and you have you've gone through so many phases in life, and now you've come to faith, where all of us like to land and shore up our faith, because there's nothing like having a faith. The faith of a mustard seed can move a mountain.
Yes.
Now, KRISTINA, tell us, 21 years ago, you embarked on this journey of exploring the Jewish community, embracing the Jewish and the Black Americans together. And tell us what you found and what you're currently doing. Something which is very intriguing, friends. Would you like me to talk to them about the town of Demona? Do you guys know that KRISTINA King, over her 2 decades of working with the Jewish community in Israel, found that in 1968, 400 African Americans went and settled, going back to the roots. 400 African American Jews went back to Israel to look for their roots, and they settled in a village called Demona, 1 hour from Jerusalem.
Yes.
And isn't that incredible?
It was absolutely fascinating. And so for me, it has been, everything that I've done with Israel has been absolutely fascinating. Whenever you're engaged with people who are working with the world, it's a mindset of thinking and of action, of activism, of helping people. And so my work, whether it was at IFCJ, whether it was with Passages and the Philos Project, or whether it was at APEC, has been with some of the most incredible, thoughtful, thinking people who are making a difference.
So now in 2023, you are on a crusade trying to get help for the Black African-American Jews in Israel, in Demona. And how many of them are there now today? 2,500 or so?
So it's about almost 4,000. It's the largest group of African-Americans that live outside of America. And so...
Wow. Could you repeat that again for our viewers, please?
The largest group of African-Americans, African-American community that lives outside of America, lives in Israel.
In Demona, the town where 4,500 of them, and
now all over Israel. So.
And you have founded the Shiloh Institute, to build bridges between the Black and the Jewish community, and you are trying to get aid. Tell us about what is the current status of these Black Americans in Israel.
So
do they have roads? Do they have houses? Do they have the electricity? Do they have food? Do they have shelter? Tell us the unknown story today. Let the world know.
Very
Go on,
good.
KRISTINA. Look into that camera and tell it all. Go tell it on the mountains.
So we know that communities from all over the world made Aliyah to Israel. And I was surprised to know that even a community from America, Black Jews who came, who traced their roots to the original Hebrew communities, went to Israel in 1968. I'm still learning all of the details, but I know this. Communities around the world help to support to help to support the Jewish community, particularly Christian communities. So for me, when I learned about them, I said, hey, this is where my community needs to help support this community that's of the descendants of enslaved Africans. So when God was bringing people from all over the world back to that Holy Land, to Israel, he didn't leave out the enslaved African.
No, but so you're telling me that today the Israel government is not taking care of the Black Americans in the town of Demona. 4,500 of them do not have basic necessities of life.
Well,
what are they ailing today?
So they are a community that's in need of support. They're in community.
What support? Could you define that? Support. It's such a general word. Is it? Yeah, come on, tell it as it is.
I'm telling you as it is. So they have been working with and have a relationship like all of the immigrant communities to Israel. That's a process, right?
No, I'm asking you.
I know what you're asking me.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is they need assistance with their housing. They've been in the same housing for 50 years. They've been there 50 years.
And they don't have
for
proper
4 generations. They need They need assistance with their housing.
Next.
They need assistance also with some of their issues around citizenship and even deportation. Some of them have been targeted for deportation, and we helped and have been a part of some of those legal things. We know the issues around immigration, and so that's been a place. But you have to have allies, and as Americans and descendants of Americans,
so are you telling me that the blacks in the town of Demona in Israel are being discriminated when they come for employment, for housing, for getting government aid and support?
It's a very complicated issues around citizenship, and it has been ongoing. It has been issues that they've had for many years. So many of them who their children who serve in the IDF and other agreements that have been made with the Israeli government, where they have come to Israel and have citizenship, and then there's been ongoing issues as we have with many immigrant communities. So whether that's in whatever country. So
is it becoming your mission to support and help the Black American Jews living in Israel in the town of Demona?
Yes.
You want to get them equal rights that other citizens of Israel has. Is that it?
Yes. So my part of my mission at Shiloh, which Shiloh is about the connection between Israel, Africa, and Black America. Okay?
Israel,
Africa,
and Black
America.
Oh, so you're now bringing Africa into
in my work, in those years of work, the Lord led me to begin to also to connect with Africa. And so there's many Hebrew communities, there's many Black Jewish and African Jewish communities all over Africa. So as I've been learning about this work and learning about this, as many people are, but specifically as a Christian, and one of the things that has been exciting to me, Dr. VJ, has been the support of the white evangelical community, and even with the event that I'm doing with Pastor Steve Muncie.
Okay, 1 minute, just hold your thought.
Okay.
Now, Israel and Gaza on the news, Gaza and Israel conflict. There's war going on.
Yes.
Each side is accusing the other side of killing innocent babies, innocent women, innocent children. Where does all that fit in with Demona and your Black American community there? What is your stand? What is Shiloh Institute going to do? Are you trying to bring peace? Are you trying to implore on your elected representatives in this country, United States, to barter peace between the Palestinians and the Jews?
So you know what Demona is known for? Do you know what it's known as?
No, go ahead.
The Village of Peace.
Oh,
why? Because they have relationships.
You're telling me now.
I'm telling you.
Good.
The Demona community is known as the Village of Peace. It has relationships with the Palestinians, with the Israelis, with Bedouins, with all kind of communities there. The people went there to live out their faith and to live out. Do you know, Dr. VGP, do you know that in 50 years in Demona, there's only been one murder? That's okay, because they have lived out
That's
peace.
good to know. That's good to know. So you're telling me that the village of peace,
Yes.
which is inhabited for 50 years in the
Yes.
town of Demona by African American Jews,
Black
are not being, black Jews, are not being given the due human rights, citizenship rights, housing needs like any other Israel citizen. And that's what you want to crusade and try to correct that situation. Is that the right language? Am I getting it right? The
So-
Shiloh Institute is all about?
is about helping to bring a voice to communities like that. So a community in Africa, a community that needs an ally to help amplify its voice and its needs
Okay,
in that country.
now, how do you see that happening? And you were telling me earlier that President Biden is going to send millions of dollars to Israel, and you want a special package for the Demona Village of Peace and the African American Jews to be bundled into that so that they get their basic needs.
Yeah, so I've been a part, as you said, working with the Jewish community, working with AIPAC, working with other communities. When I was asked and when I did outreach to the African American leaders to teach them about the needs of Israel, I didn't ask anybody what color anybody was. We came and we turned and we invited leaders and educated the community about the needs that Israel was having, and Israel and the United States. So now I'm going back to my friends, both in the Jewish community and in other places, the African American community, the Christian church, to tell them about this community that I've learned about and their needs to help us to amplify their voice. Their specifically, as you said, as we begin, when this war comes to an end, when it does, and as we begin to send.
Okay, what is your institute, which you have just started after your 20 years of experience working with the Jewish community, the Shiloh Institute, going to do to bring about peace between Gaza and Israel, the big conflict which is flaming right now?
Well,
it's doing something in February, you said earlier. Go ahead.
Yes. So in February, I think that the African American community has a voice, a moral conscience, has been a moral conscience, along with the Jewish community in America of this nation. And so we are going to, there's so much information coming from so many different places. This is not only a war on the ground, but it's a war of information. And so when that happens, people get paralyzed, not knowing what to believe and what to do. So we are convening a conference that's being hosted at Family Christian Center by Pastor Steve Muncie. And we're bringing together leaders from the Jewish community, leaders from the African American community, many communities, to talk openly about some of these issues. And I believe that the African American community has a voice, a moral voice to be able to bring into this conversation. Right now, in many places, you don't hear people. I see.
So what's the ultimate goal of this conversation? You're trying to bring faith leaders together.
Yeah.
You're trying to broker peace. You're trying to pray for peace. You're trying to implore on US President Biden to do something about it, really drastically, realistically, and immediately to end the war and not to prolong the like Ukraine-Russian war, which is going on, where billions of US dollars are getting sucked into it. So, and then at the same time, your eyes and ears opened up because of the Village of Peace, the Demona town there, and you're trying to get aid for the African Americans there who are not getting their due today in Israel. Is that right?
So people are not speaking. People are afraid to even have the conversation right now because people are.
So you're wanting to.
People need information. They need to talk to experts.
When you say the people in our country, or the people in Israel, or the people where? In Africa?
People in America, particularly in the Black church and in Black America. And people are afraid to even have a conversation that has to do with Israel. That's not the Israel that I know. I don't know.
So are you inviting the Palestinian leaders to this conversation?
Yes.
To have it's going to be giving the voice for Gaza also to present their case along with Israel case. And what you're trying to do, you're trying to get a group of faith leaders together.
Yes.
And on February 1st, hopefully the war would end before that.
Yes.
And it's going to get into the Passover. And you're going to get these faith leaders under Pastor Steve Muncie and Shiloh Institute's auspicious, and including have a Voice of Gaza, a voice of the Jewish community, the African American community, where everybody can place the facts together. And then the first thing you're going to do is pray together, come together, pray together, and then you're going to act together.
Yes.
And you're going to have a 2-day summit and come up with a bunch of recommendations. What can y'all as faith leaders, community leaders, as citizens of America do to help resolve the Gaza-Israel summit, Gaza-Israel war on one hand, and also help the underlying cause of the 4,000 African-American Jews who are inhabited in the village of peace or town of peace in Demona, which is 1 hour from Jerusalem. Is that right?
It is. These are very complicated issues, right? Both sides, when they speak to it. Peace is not a complicated issue. Everyone wants peace. But how do we get to peace? If it was an easy thing, it wouldn't be. So to be able, it's an opportunity to speak with faith leaders, particularly from the Black church and the African American church. So you're going to have,
it's going to be a conversation with outcomes and an action plan.
Yes.
So it's just not going to, it won't be, you're trying to unwind the complicated to make it simple and see how each one can work in their own field to make a difference. Right?
Very good.
Great. Thank you, KRISTINA, for joining us on Dr. VGP Talk Show. I think you have a great task on hand.
Yeah.
And I think you're the most well-prepared person because you have gone 35 times to Israel. You have worked with the Jewish community for 20 years, with the rabbis, with AIPAC, with Philo, with FIJC. So you, and now you're trying to get all the leaders, faith leaders in Midwest, the Christian leaders, the African leaders, the Muslim leaders, the Hindu leaders, the Jewish leaders, the Buddhist leaders, and everybody together and try to come to a consensus. And we wish you every best. Thank you for joining us today. Before we go, to just get a peek, I wouldn't say into your complicated personality or complex personality, into your inspiring personality, if you're given the choice of taking 3 people out for dinner, past or present, alive or dead, who would those 3 people be?
Probably there would be my father.
Okay.
Jesus.
Oh, good.
And Dr. King.
Great. Fantastic. So KRISTINA King, if she's given an opportunity to take 3 people out for dinner, she would like to take her father out, Jesus, and Dr. King. Wonderful. Now, also, KRISTINA, on that same line of thought, how, in 3 words, how will you describe yourself?
I'm a person of principles, a person of courage, and I would hope a person who is inspired by love for people.
So KRISTINA King describes herself as a woman of principles, a woman of courage, and a woman of love. Wonderful. KRISTINA, on a parting note, do you have anything special to tell our president today? I know he's up for re-election this year, 2024. And in this episode is going to be our first episode of Dr. VGP Talk Show in 2024, especially with what's going on with Gaza and Israel conflict. Do you have some demands to make of him? Or are you going to be gracious and let it go? Go ahead, speak to our viewers.
All of us want to see peace, but peace doesn't always happen that easily. We know that, as Dr. VGP also knows from Gandhi and from great leaders, the peace doesn't just always come easily. It takes people of principle, people of courage to rise up and to be an example, because oftentimes it takes sacrifice in order for peace to come. That's what I've learned about in that community there in Demona, the sacrifice that they've made. The most important message, I believe, for all politicians is that this world is not about the material things. It's not about just money and those things. It's about making a better world for the people, for human beings. And so I think that's what our president and any other leader needs to remember, is that how can we make the world a better place for people?
Great. Thank you so much, KRISTINA King. We learned a lot about your work between the Jewish community and the African American community, especially about the town of Demona, where 4,500 African American Jews are there and who are not given who can improve their lives much more.
Yes.
And one thing I learned,
who deserve the same support from America as any other community, and to be able to rely upon America in the same way for their needs as any other American Jews who have made Aliyah to America.
Yeah.
To Israel.
Absolutely right. And one thing, Christina, you made it very clear. 50 years, 4,500 American Jews living in Demona, there's only one murder. So guys, we should know that they are a peace-loving community. And that's the message I got from you today. And thank you for being on Dr. VGP Talk Show.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the very best and support you in your mission and crusade on trying to resolve the Gaza-Israel war in your way. Everyone's action, everyone's word makes a difference. Thank you so much, Ms. KRISTINA King, for joining us today, and we welcome you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.